You might not believe it, but I'm trilingual. Welcome back to the Rice Bowl channel. So you might see me and be like, yo, why is this guy lying? Why is this guy capping? One languages, maybe two if we're being generous, but nah, I speak three languages. Welcome back to the Rice Bowl channel. English, French, and Japanese are what they are. And I'll just give a quick background on myself. Basically, my mom, she's from North America. My dad, he's from Japan. I grew up in North America. So I grew up in like this very international setting. So I was able to learn all these languages, like very blessed from my environment. But just going from the top, how did I learn English, my first language? English is my mother tongue, This was just, I learned it in my sleep, so easy, through osmosis. Like when you go back to Japan and people hear me speak English, they're like, whoa, you must be so smart. Whoa, you must have studied. Nah, nah, nah. My mom, I'm only half Japanese, and my mom taught me all the English, and like just society. You turn on TV, it's in English. You go to your grandparents' house, it's in English. The cereal box, it's in English. Even when my dad would speak to me in Japanese, I would answer to him in English when I was younger, just to say, like, I lived in such, like, this English environment, so I was able to learn English in my sleep. So that was, like, so easy for me. And yeah, so we're going to go on to number two now. How did I learn French? This one was arguably the hardest. So when I was in kindergarten, around 6 years old, we had options. My parents had options. Do we send, like, me to an English kindergarten or to a French kindergarten? And guess what they choose? They chose a French kindergarten. This was attached to a elementary school. So I just like escalated into the whole French system. I continued into French high school and I stopped in grade 11. After grade 11, college I did in English, but after grade 11, no more French for me. But I still did 16, 17 years of French. So when I was 6 years old, I get into this kindergarten and I don't speak a lick of French. I cry the first day because the teacher's trying to tell me something I don't understand. And the other kids around me, didn't really speak any French either. I was in one of these welcoming classes. We had four kindergarten classes. It was like the A class, the B class, the C class. And these were for all kids who already spoke French. But I was placed in the welcoming class. So these are for kids who were like fresh to the country. Their parents were fresh to the country, Like I was born here, but like my parents still sent me into that class because I had to learn French. So I basically learned the French from the ground up like this, but I didn't really grow up in a French environment, I'd speak the English, like in English with my friends. At home, I'd speak in English and Japanese. And later on in life when I was in grade 5 or 6, I started reading books in French, but I never really watched TV in French or anything either. But this is through like force, basically, brute force of the educational system where I managed to learn French. But the thing is, it wasn't out of pure enjoyment of my heart, So I never really got super good at French, If you're studying French right now, féminin, masculin, and all that, I still make mistakes and I'm almost 30 years old. And I never learned how to properly write in French. For example, when I was in grade 7, we had to do spelling exams and I'd usually get like -20 on 100. No joke, -20. And then once I got -2 on 100 or something like that. I make so many mistakes, guys. -2, I got a sticker. The teacher was congratulating me because I had an improvement. But yeah, all that to say, my French writing is so bad. Even like when I went to high school to graduate, the government made us do this written test. They basically give us little information booklets and we had to read through it and they'd ask a question regarding that. So in order for me to pass, I would have to read these information booklets, these different stories, these different like articles, and then I'd have to predict like 5 different questions that could happen, write what I think might happen, like what question they're gonna ask me, write out my answer in like Word documents, like, and then spell check it, memorize how to spell the words, and then I basically had to memorize and just like regurgitate that, and that's how I passed high school. So even though like I know how to like speak, write, and read French, it's not perfect. But yeah, English was all natural, but French was brute force. And you might be like, whoa, he's not completely fluent then. But like, I'll be honest, the last environment I worked at was in a French environment. Yeah, it was a French, yeah, like all the food factories, now that I think of it, were French factories, And yeah, there was like a lot of people who didn't speak French there, but my direct bosses, the parent companies, like a lot of French people, this and that, and I had no problem writing the emails as long as I have spell check in Google Translate. Not Google Translate, but Google to check the masculin, féminin, if the noun is male or female, like that, no problem. But yeah, like I said, English I learned naturally in my sleep, and French was brute force. And begs the question, how did I become fluent in Japanese? By growing up in North America. So, like I said, until 6 years old, even when my dad would speak to me in English, I would just answer to him in Japanese. And they placed me into a Saturday school. I don't know, like if you're a parent who's watching and you're thinking about placing your child into a Saturday school, this looks like a huge responsibility on the parents, honestly. But my parents did it for me. They'd have to bring me there on Saturday at 8:50 a.m. or whatever the time was, and after school, help me with the homework. But yeah, anyways, I started going to this Japanese school and I started seeing all the other kids speak in Japanese. And then my dad told me, like, at one point, I just started to answer him in Japanese. So yeah, that's how that happened. I went to Saturday school and started answering him in Japanese. And me and my dad would talk like a lot when I was younger, like 4 hours sometimes, 5 hours a night, 5 hours a day, especially when I had more time in elementary school. Even now in life, like I have a lot of time now, so I'm able to talk with him a lot. But in elementary school when I was growing up, I spoke to him a lot in Japanese. And the only issue is when you're talking with your parents in Japanese, Japanese is one of those languages where there's a lot of different forms of Japanese. So you don't really learn like formal Japanese, business Japanese, there's different forms. So that was like, what could you do, right? We live in North America. I don't really have Japanese friends around me. I had one Japanese friend. He went to Japanese school also, but I think like he kind of like dissociated with that and he doesn't really speak Japanese anymore. I'm not too sure what his story is. I don't see him anymore, but growing up I had one guy like that. A couple of friends like that actually. But yeah, me like what really helped me growing up was just like speaking a lot of Japanese with my parents, was my father, sorry. And I stopped going to Japanese school in grade 7 and I had like this awareness, this like light bulb moment where it's like, yo, if I stop practicing my Japanese now, yo, this is all going to go into the drain. It's going to be over. So I just immersed myself in Japanese culture, reading books in Japanese. I never did that before when I was like 14, continuing to read mangas in Japanese, Japanese music. And this is when YouTube started to pop off in Japan. So I started watching like a lot of videos in Japanese also. I recommend doing this actually if you have like a baseline level of Japanese and really want to improve, because even though I was fluent in Japanese and like I'd speak with my dad every night, when I started watching YouTube videos in Japanese back in the day, it's like words that I've never heard before, like slang, young people words, things like that. So I was just like confused for some stuff, so I had to search some stuff up. And if there was like a kanji I couldn't read in the title, search it up. And no joke, watching YouTube in Japanese like whew, like really like brought up my level. And yeah, I was addicted, not gonna lie, I was addicted to Japanese YouTube back in like 2012, 2013. But that really brought me to even more fluency. And then when I started working in Japan, I was just like, yo, I don't really know formal Japanese all that well. So it's a bit embarrassing, right? Like, you can't talk to your boss like, hey, yo, like maybe in North America, like in New York or like, I don't know, Vancouver, that would pass. Like, if you told your boss, like, hey, yo. But like in Japan, that wouldn't pass. So I just started watching the news a lot because on the news, they use a lot of formal Japanese. So I just started like mimicking how they speak almost. And then I started Googling about business Japanese, this and that. But yeah, Japanese, like I said, like complicated language to an extent. But I got the base by talking with my dad and going to Saturday school. I learned like the basic kanjis until grade 7. And after that, it was an effort on my part, just immersing myself in the culture. Like, not gonna lie, I went to French high school, like I said, and my grades started to slip because of that. I was immersing myself into Japanese culture, but still, it's what I wanted to do, and that was out of pure enjoyment. So, just in conclusion, English, this was a breeze. I learned it in my sleep, and just reading, reading was a different story. I had to like mimic the French syllables that I was learning and then like piece it all together in my brain. But whatever, by 8 years old, I knew how to perfectly read in English. French, this was forced by the education system. In Japanese, I guess it was like immersion from my parents, but also my pure enjoyment as I grew up, because I had a solid base, and then I really worked on top of that through immersing myself with YouTube, watching the news, reading books, like all of that jazz. And if you're like a parent out there and you're like, oh, should I teach a third language, a second language to my child? I highly recommend it. Just make an effort. If you speak like a different language and you're growing up in a like North America or like Europe or some, like, you know what I mean, like in a different environment, like I just recommend, like, who am I to recommend, right? But just to make this effort to teach this language to your child, because then they'll be able to enjoy like sports in that language, entertainment in that language, music, books. It's just like a whole other world of possibilities. Anyways, thank you for watching today's video. Have a nice day, see you in the next one, and goodbye.